Picture this: a statuesque blonde with ice-cold eyes, porcelain skin, and legs so long they seem to defy gravity. In a sea of bombshells and bronzed goddesses, she stood out not for her warmth, but for her chilling detachment. Nadja Auermann didn't smile to please the camera, she didn't chase the spotlight, and she certainly didn't play by fashion's rules. Yet somehow the entire industry bent around her. She wasn't meant to be a supermodel. In fact, she was too aloof, too stark, too German in her beauty critics once said. But that exact froideur, that almost alien aesthetic became her weapon. Within just a few years, Nadja went from Berlin waitress to muse of Helmut Newton, from walking in Jill Sanders' pristine minimalism to commanding Versace's maximalist chaos. She broke records for her impossibly long legs, but it was her enigmatic silence that made designers crave her. She was once dubbed the Ice Queen of fashion, not for cruelty, but for cool precision. No scandal, no outbursts, no obvious ambition, just presence, that unshakable presence. But behind those glacial stares lay a woman far more complicated and a downfall few could predict. Nadja Auermann was born on March 19, 1971, in Berlin, then a divided city where the Cold War cast long shadows over everyday life. Raised in the West Berlin district of Charlottenburg, she grew up not in glamour, but in a quiet, disciplined, middle-class household. Her father was a computer specialist, and her mother worked in government administration, both structured, pragmatic professions. There were no creative outbursts at the dinner table, no artistic chaos in her childhood bedroom. It was a world of order, expectations, and silence. That silence would come to define her. As a child, Nadja was introspective, often distant. Teachers remembered her as intelligent, but hard to read. She wasn't the bubbly type, nor the rebellious teen trying to stand out. She simply observed, watched the world from behind a wall of thoughtful detachment. While other girls dreamed of being singers or actresses, Nadja never vocalized such things. In fact, she rarely vocalized at all. Not out of shyness, but because she didn't see the point in saying things that didn't matter. She was tall early on. By age 13, she towered over her classmates, already showing the impossibly long limbs that would become her signature. But that height wasn't a blessing, it was awkward. Her legs didn't fit desks, her body didn't match the clothes in stores, and the attention it brought felt more intrusive than flattering. She often slouched to appear smaller, less visible. There was no glamour in her physicality, yet only discomfort. Nadja's parents, ever pragmatic, encouraged her toward academics. Modelling was not something taken seriously in their household. It was frivolous, unserious. Besides, Nadja herself had no interest. At that time, Berlin wasn't a fashion capital. It was a city stitched together by politics and post-war healing. The idea of runways, photographers, and designer gowns felt as foreign as another planet. But one thing always separated Nadja from her peers: her eyes. Cool, pale blue with a gaze that pierced but never pleaded. Even in childhood photos, she looked like she knew something others didn't. That quiet confidence would prove magnetic later in life, but at the time it simply made her hard to approach. Friends were few. She wasn't unfriendly, just distant. The world didn't intimidate her, but neither did it excite her. Still beneath that icy veneer there was sensitivity. She cared about people's feelings, even if she rarely expressed her own. She hated cruelty, injustice, and superficiality. She just didn't scream about it. Before her fateful encounter with modelling, Nadja's path seemed ordinary, perhaps destined for university, maybe a civil job like her parents. But Berlin in the late 80s was shifting, opening. The wall would soon fall, and with that collapse, so would many of the barriers that separated her from an entirely different future. She didn't chase fashion. Fashion came for her. It began, not with a casting call or a fashion dream, but with a friend's casual suggestion. Nadja Auermann was 19, working as a waitress in Berlin after finishing high school. She had no portfolio, no agency, no illusions of fame. Her life was modest, filled with simple routines and quiet ambition. But the world was changing, so was Berlin, and someone finally noticed her. A friend persuaded her to send a photo to Karin's, a local modelling agency. Nadja obliged with little expectation. She didn't smile in the picture. She didn't pose. She simply stared into the lens with her signature detachment, not realising that this very lack of effort would captivate the scouts. Within days, she was called in. Within weeks, she was on a plane to Paris. Paris in the early 1990s was a storm of beauty, attitude and competition. The era of the supermodel was in full swing. Naomi Linda. Christie ruled the runways. Nadja arrived with no name, no runway walk, and no clear sense of belonging. She was too tall, too pale, too cold for the sun-kissed glamour of the time. Clients weren't quite sure what to do with her. But then something strange happened. Designers began to take notice, not of her warmth, but of her iciness. Nadja didn't try to seduce the camera. She didn't grin or flirt. She simply stood there regal and unreadable, as though she were modelling for no one but herself. That aloofness, once seen as a flaw, became her brand. Helmut Newton was among the first to understand her power. He cast her in a now iconic black and white spread, posing her like a sculpture. Cold, statuesque, and utterly magnetic. Newton didn't want softness, he wanted myth. And Nadja, with her glacial beauty and impossible proportions, gave him just that. From that moment, the momentum built quickly. She landed a campaign for Prada, then for Jil Sander, where her minimalism aligned perfectly with the brand's austere aesthetic. Fashion editors began to whisper, "She's different." Nadja didn't follow the mold. She shattered it quietly. What also helped her rise was timing. As fashion began to shift from the exuberance of the 80s toward the more cerebral, controlled style of the 90s, Nadja embodied that evolution. She was the face of a new era, cool, conceptual, and impossibly modern. But it wasn't all easy. Nadja was notoriously private and shy. Castings drained her, interviews annoyed her. She didn't court fame and she didn't pretend to be grateful for its attention. Some photographers found her distant, others found her hypnotic, but no one ever forgot her. One thing was certain, Nadja Auermann had arrived and she wasn't like anyone else. By the mid-1990s, Nadja Auermann was no longer a rising star, she was a force. Her face graced the covers of Vogue, Harper's Bazaar, and Elle across continents. She became a favourite of every major designer who sought not just a model, but a statement. Versace wanted power, Jil Sander wanted restraint, Karl Lagerfeld wanted mystery. Nadja gave them all exactly what they wanted, without ever breaking character. Her defining feature, those famously long legs, became the stuff of fashion legend. At 44 inches, they were certified by Guinness World Records as the longest legs in the modelling industry. But Nadja never played into the hype. While the press gushed over her proportions, she maintained a surgical distance from self-celebration. Her beauty, though impossible to ignore, was wielded like a weapon, not a performance. What made her peak so distinct was her versatility cloaked in minimalism. In the same year, she could walk for Alexander McQueen's dark theatricality and appear in a Chanel haute couture campaign that exuded classical elegance. She adapted to aesthetics without ever losing herself. Her presence didn't bend, it demanded adaptation from the viewer. Then came the Revlon contract, one of the most coveted commercial deals in modelling. Nadja joined the elite league of supermodels whose beauty translated from runway to billboard. But unlike Cindy or Claudia, Nadja didn't sweeten her image for mass appeal. Even in beauty campaigns, she looked like an untouchable goddess, not the girl next door. She wasn't just admired, she was studied. Designers like Thierry Mugler, Gianni Versace, and John Galliano spoke of her as more than a model, as a visual concept. Helmut Newton photographed her again and again, each frame revealing a different layer of icy perfection. He once said Nadja wasn't sexy in the traditional sense, she was disturbing, like a beautiful threat. At fashion weeks, her walk became a moment. She didn't stomp, she glided. With her razor-straight posture and glacial expression, she seemed to float above the catwalk. Spectators fell silent when she entered. She didn't need drama. She was the drama. Yet perhaps what defined her peak more than campaigns or covers was how other models reacted to her. She wasn't part of the supermodel squad. She rarely did the party circuit or publicity rounds. Naomi, Kate, and Helena were lightning. Nadja was ice, and that made her presence even more mythical. Despite her fame, Nadja refused to let the industry consume her. She turned down projects that felt beneath her aesthetic. She rarely gave interviews. She didn't care about chasing Hollywood or building a brand. She was a model, an image maker, not a celebrity. In an era when personality was becoming a marketing tool, Nadja stayed silent, and in that silence, she became louder than anyone else. In the fashion world of the 1990s, rebellion often came loud bleached hair, dramatic scandals, front-row feuds. But Nadja Auermann never raised her voice. Her rebellion was quieter, more subversive. While other supermodels fed the media machine, Nadja starved it. She refused to play the smiling muse. She chose restraint over seduction, mystery over access. And in doing so, she rejected one of fashion's most sacred rules: visibility equals value. She rarely gave interviews. When she did, her answers were short, sometimes cryptic, always uninterested in pleasing. "I'm not here to talk," she once said bluntly to a glossy magazine. "I'm here to be seen. And even that I do only when I must." To Nadja, modelling was not a personality contest. It was image architecture, and she refused to confuse her face with herself. Unlike her contemporaries who chased Hollywood scripts or perfume empires, Nadja resisted commodification. She didn't start a lingerie line. She didn't marry a rock star. She didn't brand herself. While others turned their fame into franchises, Nadja guarded her identity with surgical precision. She belonged to no one, not even the audience. Even in her work, she challenged norms. In an industry that demanded models mold themselves to each designer's vision, Nadja retained her spine. Photographers noted how she never overacted. She didn't contort her body into unnatural shapes. She simply existed, calm, poised, chillingly confident. And somehow, that stillness carried more power than 1,000 poses. She pushed back too, against the industry's obsession with charisma and commercial appeal. Revlon may have signed her, but she never softened for the camera. She wore makeup like armor, not decoration. Her ads didn't sparkle, they stabbed. While others were selling dreams, Nadja embodied control. Her fashion choices also signaled quiet defiance. Off the runway, she often dressed in clean, minimalist lines, no labels, no flash. While tabloids stalked red carpets for glam shots, Nadja often skipped them entirely. She didn't need the noise. She was the message. Even her role as a mother became a radical act in fashion's unforgiving timeline. At the height of her career, Nadja chose to have children, first a daughter in 1997, then a son later on. Where many models feared pregnancy might end their reign, Nadja embraced it without apology. She disappeared for months, then returned, just as sharp, just as striking. She never asked for understanding. She simply lived on her terms. But perhaps her boldest rebellion was emotional. In a world addicted to performance, be it beauty, sex, or sentiment, Nadja gave nothing away. No tears, no dramatic confessions, no tabloid fodder. She remained unreadable, and that frustrated The press delighted designers and preserved her myth. She wasn't trying to be different, she simply was. In an industry designed to break women into categories, commercial, editorial, sexy, classic, Nadja refused classification. She was both and neither, and in doing so, she became one of fashion's most enduring enigmas. There was no dramatic fall from grace, no tabloid implosion. Nadja Auermann didn't crash, she simply withdrew. Just as quietly as she had entered fashion's spotlight, she began to slip from it. Campaigns became fewer, runway appearances turned rare. By the early 2000s, the woman once hailed as fashion's ice queen had melted from public view, leaving behind a haunting silence. Some of it was by choice. Nadja had always treated modelling as a profession, not a calling. She didn't crave relevance. She didn't mourn her fading presence. What mattered more was motherhood. In 1997, she gave birth to her first child, a daughter, with actor Olaf Becker. Later, she had a son with another partner. Becoming a mother did not ruin her career, as the industry liked to whisper, but it shifted her priorities. She refused to sacrifice her children's privacy for a few more headlines. Still, the fashion world doesn't forgive stillness. As new faces emerged fresher, louder, more commercial, Nadja's quiet brand of beauty began to feel too distant. The minimalism of the 90s was over, glamour was back, sex was back, the public wanted accessibility, and Nadja had never been accessible. Then came the legal trouble. In 2011, German authorities accused her of tax evasion, allegedly failing to declare over €500,000 in income. It was a rare, unflattering spotlight on a woman who had always kept her personal affairs off limits. Though she denied intentional wrongdoing and said she relied on bad financial advice, the court ruled against her. She was fined over €90,000. For a model who had built her entire image on poise and control, the news hit differently. It wasn't a scandal in the Hollywood sense. There were no salacious details, no televised meltdowns, but it pierced the myth of perfection. The Ice Queen had stumbled, and the press didn't hesitate to take note. Yet even in this, Nadja refused to dramatise. She didn't go on apology tours. She didn't appear on talk shows to explain herself. She accepted the verdict, paid the fine, and retreated once more. True to form, she allowed no one access to her inner life. Throughout the 2010s, her appearances became sporadic, an occasional editorial here, a rare front-row sighting there. When she did resurface, she looked nearly unchanged, tall, composed, aloof. But the industry had moved on. The age of the influencer had arrived, and Nadja belonged to a time before hashtags and selfie culture. Some called her forgotten, others called her timeless. But one thing was clear: Nadja Auermann was no longer part of fashion's daily vocabulary, and she didn't seem to mind. Nadja Auermann didn't build an empire. She didn't chase fame into reality television or launch a cosmetics line stamped with her name. She didn't rebrand herself as a mogul or a lifestyle guru. Instead, she walked away almost invisibly, leaving behind an image so precise, so unforgettable, it didn't need constant renewal. Her legacy lives not in noise, but in silence. She became a blueprint for the modern cerebral model, proof that a woman could command attention without smiling, without pandering, without giving herself away. In a world that demanded more, Nadja thrived by offering less. Her stare became a weapon, her restraint a revolution. Designers still cite her as muse. Photographers still study her lines. New generations of models who reject overexposure owe a quiet debt to her. She showed that mystery was not weakness, it was power, and that you didn't have to belong to the industry to dominate it. Today, Nadja lives mostly out of the public eye, raising her children and choosing peace over spectacle. She reappears on occasion, gracing a magazine cover, walking a runway for a designer who remembers. But even in return, she brings no fanfare. Because Nadja Auermann never needed an audience to matter. She was and remains a presence. And presence, true commanding presence, never fades, never fades, never fades.